Let's give our bro manu a warm round of applause. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. E uri tāngi i Ngāti Maniapoto me Kaitahu, ko Manu Barrett Ao Hou. I'm the founder of a energy startup called Solar Sense, based out of Aotearoa. But before going any further, I just wanted to have a quick thanks to Owae Marae for your hospitality and awesome kai and your flash wharekai, man. And but also being invited here by Ngāiwi or Taranaki, Kay Marie, Will Edwards and Seta. Thank you for inviting me to talk here today. But so what I want to talk about today was two things. So now I could talk forever. I could talk about 100 different topics. Could talk about a whole heap of different things, but the two main things I want to talk about today was how the electricity sector works and some of the mahi that we've actually done to reduce energy hardship. But actually, I could probably even keep going on anyway. But before we get into detail, what I want to talk about is how I actually got here. So, believe it or not, I actually never had any desire to enter the electricity sector. In fact, I had no intention of ever reducing energy hardship or solving the problems that came with it. But fate had other plans for me, and hence why I'm here today. So I actually originally began my career as a pilot and for 7 years, and then I was also worked in the air traffic sector for another 7 years. Now, what I did in my spare time was tinker. Much like Tama, I like to tinker around with stuff, and at the time what I wanted to do is try and form a tech company. Now, I had no idea what that tech company was going to be, but at that point in time, about 5-6 years ago, I was working on a small piece of hardware, and its purpose was to enhance the efficiency of solar panels. Now, the goal was to develop this tech, sell it on to solar companies or solar installers, become a billionaire just much like Tama and make it rain. But But in 2020, I actually got my chance. So as we all knew, COVID came along, but I had the ability to actually pursue this concept, this idea of developing the tech and try and turn into a business. And that was through the Kōkiri Māori Business Accelerator. So I was selected, I tend to like to wander around from time to time. Can you hear me? There we go, yeah. So I was actually selected as part of the 2020 Kōkiri Māori Business Accelerator along with 9 other startups. Now, back then, we were actually called Barrett Dynamics. So we were actually a small motley crew. I just kind of scrambled together my wife and my little brother because we just had to make 3 people in order to actually get into it. But funnily enough, at the same time, there was another startup. That was No Maira. So they started up their journey at the same time. So they were very small time. They had less than 100 customers. They weren't very well known at the time, but we were still doing our own mahi. I was focused on our tech, and they were looking to establish themselves as the first Māori energy company. Now, at the time, we didn't really know each other, but over the course of the 4 months as part of the accelerator, we began to know each other really, really well. But not only that, we actually shared a office with No Maira, so we actually began to learn a lot about the electricity sector and how the electricity sector actually worked. Now, after months of product development, working on our tech, market validation, product validation, trying to get some pre-sales out there, what it was determined was our piece of tech that we worked really hard on was rubbish. It actually wasn't very good at all. It was unreliable and it was expensive. Now, granted, it was a bit deflating, but it wasn't a waste of time because during our journey, we had learnt a lot. And one of the things we'd learnt is how the electricity sector actually worked, because how we think it works and how it actually works are two very different things. But not only that, we actually become very aware, very conscious of energy hardship, its impacts, but also the struggle that small independent retailers have at trying to acquire affordable energy for those in need, such as Ngā Māori. So even at this point, we go, all right, product wasn't any good, but we learned a lot. So what next? So we say, well, it's still the middle of COVID. I'm not rushing back to aviation anytime soon. So we thought, why don't we try and use technology to help solve energy hardship? Now, the first topic I want to talk about is how the electricity sector works. And the reason why I picked this is because there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of things that people are unaware of. And I hope we should answer some questions that probably a few of you have been thinking of in the back of your heads. Now, overarching, we kind of know that we have generation, so there's 5 key sectors: generation, transmission, distribution, metering, and retailing. Now, we hear it, but we don't really get explained or really get told what does that actually mean. So I thought I want to take this chance to actually go into detail around what each of those actually mean. So generation. So this is the assets. These are the entities that own, operate, and produce electricity. Now here in Aotearoa, at any given time, 80 to 90% of all the electricity that's produced is by these 4. The remaining 10% is usually a small mix. Now there's more than that, but there's a small mix of what we call independent generators. Now for some context, there's some actually Māori entities in there, Tauhara North Number 2 and Tuarapaki. But coming back to what Tam was talking about fungibles, what he was talking about is all the electricity is essentially tipped into one single pool. So if you're a customer of Genesis, a lot of people go, oh, my power comes from Genesis. It's actually incorrect. Only 20% of your power probably comes from Genesis. It's all mixed into one. And essentially what happens is everyone pulls in the pool. No one can actually get that very drop of water that you put into the pool. But what they can do is they can measure how much goes in and they can measure how much comes out. So that's how we transact the electricity into the sector at the moment. Is we actually have no idea what electrons come from Benmore or Clyde, but we just assume that if you pull it out this end of the pool, that's where it comes. So that's how the electricity sector works in terms of what Tam was talking about, essentially just a big pool of electricity. And in terms of your power bill, 30% of your power actually goes towards the generators. Transmission. Now, transmission is technically this pool that we're talking about. So the purpose of the transmission is to get that electricity from that power station to the substations of the towns and cities that you live in. Now, there's a single entity that is responsible for this. That's Transpower. So they own the physical assets. However, the financial transacting and accounting is actually taken care of by the New Zealand Stock Exchange. So there's actually 2 different processes because one process lags behind the other. So what we're talking about when Tom was talking about arbitraging and when we hear the term spot market, what we're talking about is the New Zealand Stock Exchange and the lag between the speed that the electricity flows to the time it is transacted. And there's a lag between the two, and you can take a financial gain from that time difference. That represents 10% of your bill. Now distribution. So this is where it gets a little interesting. So the purpose of the distributors is to get your electricity from the substations to your homes, your businesses, your whare, your marae. And Aotearoa is unique that they are location specific and we have 28 of them. Now they're a mix of private, public, overseas and community-owned entities. Each with their own fees and tariffs, their own mandates, their own corporate structures, almost completely entirely. But for context, where we are here in Waitara, we are in the Power Co network. So, Taranaki Power Co, where my home is in Te Awamutu, is Waipa, but 28 these, and all these are all different types of entities, companies, different structures, you name it. Now, this represents 30% of your bill. Now, this has gone up a little bit because there's been a slight lack of investment in terms of the actual infrastructure. So the distributors were allowed to increase the distribution price from the Commerce Commission. So that price hikes that you guys are seeing at the moment on your power bill is actually from the distribution part of your power bill. Metering. Now, the purpose of a meter is to gather the information of how much electricity and when you have used it. This is then passed on to your retailer or your power company to formulate your bill. But what a lot of you probably don't realise are these two are owned by separate companies. A lot of them are actually data companies that own this. And this represents about 5% of your power bill. And lastly, retail. So the function of the retailer is for me, you, the public, businesses to be able to access electricity. And they basically give you the access to it via a fee. Once again, the lion's share of retailers are these four, but it's also important to note these are all fully owned subsidiaries of the major four, with your independence in behind. Now, one thing I just want to highlight a little bit is Nova, Ecotricity, EcoSmart, Pulse. These are all your independents, and what I mean by independence is a lot of these guys either have a limited amount or no power stations at all, or no generation. So your Octopus, Electric Kiwi, No Maida don't have any power stations. And because of this, they actually have to go back to the big four to firm up the contracts to be able to pass electricity on through to their customers. And that represents about 10% of your bill. Now, the whole reason I kind of went through this whole exercise is to show people how many different entities, how many different companies, how many different fingers touch your power bill before you get it. But also the struggle that the independents have at trying to get fair, affordable electricity for the people that need it. Now, what did we do about it? So during this whole journey, we learnt a whole heap of things. So one, I learnt not only how the electricity sector worked, but through basically our research development, we also learnt that you could actually bypass some of these processes. And this is kind of part of what Tom is going on about here. What we learnt is you could actually inject the electricity into the distribution part, but not only that, you don't have to have one single large energy asset. You could have multiple energy assets and accumulate them all together to act as if it was a single power plant. Now, at the time, my knowledge of the sector wasn't deep enough and we didn't have the software to do it. But serendipitously, we actually met another ally, and that was John Campbell of Our Energy. He actually had the software and the know-how to be able to pair his software to our hardware. Now I just had to go prove it. How hard could it be? So again, what we wanted to do is we needed to prove it. But I mean, in the beginning, people thought I was just nuts. They didn't think that could be pulled off. But what we did is we went in partnership with the Ngāti Maniapoto Marae Pack Trust. We said, look, what we want to do is we want to try and prove that you could do a real proof of concept, but you could scale it. Ngāti Maniapoto Marae Pack Trust, their mission was to find an alternative, innovative solution to reduce energy hardship for the iwi members. So what we ended up doing next is we built three small to medium scale solar farms on their beef and their dairy farms. This electricity was then basically, the electricity that was produced was then sold on to the wholesale electricity market. That was cashed out, and then that was credited against the whānau that was selected by the Ngāti Maniapoto Marae Pack Trust that had been identified as being in energy hardship. Now, this is technically called a virtual power plant, or VPP. We didn't actually know the name of it at the time. It was just some random idea, but that was the official name for it. Now, what was good about this is the whānau could remain with their existing retailers without changing, and we could still credit it. But the beauty of the VPP was it was as if the whānau or the whare had solar without it actually having solar on their roof. You could achieve the same thing, irrespective of where they were in the country. Now, this is not like, a lot of the stuff isn't kind of like new. This has been around for a while. So this was technically built in 2021. It was commissioned in 2022. Tama's got basically a variation of it. There's the Care Fittinga project in the Manutau. Again, it's a variation of the same thing. And there's a few of them around the place, but they're just not well known. And not a lot of people know about it. So this was actually where it was a really good forum to come here to talk about and explain there's actually another way to do stuff. There's actually anyway, but the issue is we have stuck in the legacy mindset of how we think we think electricity should be delivered to us. But yeah, really the key points. Wanted to show everyone how electricity actually works, but also the challenges that the independent retailers, and again, like I'm probably going to emphasise this more than anyone, but particularly No Maida, because they're there specifically for this reason, but the challenges that they are facing. But also, there's an alternative approach. There's an alternative way to do stuff rather than that legacy two-dimensional way of having your traditional energy retailer. I mean, these solutions aren't like ideas or dreams. These are physical things. Just like Tama's one, just like mine, just like Care Fittinga. They're all physical things that have been running. Mine's been running for like near on 3 years. And for context, there's actually going to be a hydro project tagged to this solar project for the Ngāti Mania Pōtūmora Pack Trust. But it's also a way, again, of empowering communities. But the beauty of these setups is that that's true mana motuhake. It's true. They can decide whatever price they want for the electricity. They can decide to move it however they want. They don't have to go begging anybody else for a contract. They don't have to do anything like that. That's all it's autonomously under their control. But at the core, and probably my last little sales pitch part, but this is what SolarSense does. This is if there's anybody that's looking to develop, looking to implement, looking to build solutions, connect these dots together, this is what I do. But yeah, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mahi nui, kia ora.
Kia ora, Manu. Now, hands up who knew about that whole distribution, metering, and how many hands are involved. Oh, kia ora. Yeah, there's a few. There's a few that may be aware. How many companies are involved? When we asked Manu to do an assessment of our papakainga, we've got 10 homes, and it was Manu that identified for Zach that the panels were on the wrong side of the house, which means that, you know, a big chunk of the day they're not sucking up any of the sun. So that was, a process for Zach. But what we were also exploring was the potential to develop a solar farm on our whenua, and what that might look like for us. And through that journey, Manu had also identified that every single house in our papakainga are paying $10 a week for a meter. And so that's 10 homes, that's $100 a week, that's $400 a month that we're all paying independently. That's just for the meter. I, as an independent person on the papakainga, I pay $150 to $300 a month for my power. Now, then again, you times that by 10 homes, that's $3,000. That's going out of our pocket, boof, into somebody else's hands. And so what can we do to have mana motuhake over our power on our papakainga? And I'm pretty certain that many of you will be dealing with the same issue in different ways as well. Are there any questions before we wrap into the final practical part of today, and then we will be ready to wrap up? But any other questions for Manu whilst he's here? Oh, we got one here. Kia ora. Just introduce your name, please, sir.
I'm Steve Francis. Just had a question. Here you're obviously you're cutting out the distributor middleman, so like PowerCo here, but you're still using the lines, yeah? So is there a...
The way we do is like you're still dependent. We don't say go totally off grid. What we're doing is we're saying there's a couple of different ways you can approach the problem. So when you design a system, you should design a system enough that you cover your lines charge on top of the power that you require. You still need the system. So what we're saying is, look, the centralised part's always going to be there as a security supply. You don't want to fully go off grid because you're not going to, the solar panels or the batteries that you do have, you're not going to be able to take advantage of certain parts of the sector. But you still need the network, the distribution network. And we're not saying that, but we're saying what you can do is you can form collective energy communities, and they can take various shapes and forms. But we're just showing this is one way that we did it, and it worked really well for the Ngāti Manipoto Marae Pactress. Doesn't mean it's going to work well for everybody, and it depends upon what the outcome that each entity or group wants. But this scenario worked well for them. Yeah.
Kia ora, George Takuinga. I just want to ask a question about the transmission side of things. So are you looking at cutting out the transformer side of it altogether?
No, what we're saying is that when we first did, you didn't have to punch in the electricity at the transmission side. Now, there's a lot of conversations going on in the background. I think Tama just talked about it just before around if you're moving electricity across networks, we suggest, yep, that's probably fair enough to pay for a transmission fee. But if you're moving electricity internally within a network, why should you have to pay? So in certain circumstances, again, it depends upon the approach that you're taking. But part of what we're saying is, like, for the most people that we've talked to, they want to have collectives internal to a network. So PowerCo to PowerCo, Waipa to Waipa network, well to well. And a part of what we're saying is, well, should you really have it? But what we're saying is you didn't have to involve Transpower for the generation side. Traditionally, generation, you spend $100 million on a big geothermal or big coal plant, which would involve Transpower. This process method, you don't have to. Yeah.
All right, well, there's a gift coming forward with you from our whānau here. Ho mai te paki whānau.